Chapter 2, The Early Years. The city of Nemirov, where Reb Noson was born and brought up, is situated in the Vinnytsia Oblast of the Ukraine. Until the year 1793, when Reb Noson turned 13, the entire region of the Ukraine was still under the rule of the Kingdom of Poland. Nemirov had been an important fortress town, and records of Jewish settlement there go back to the early 1600s. In the 1630s, during the heyday of Torah culture in Poland, Rabbi Yom Tov Heller, author of Tosafos Yom Tov on the Mishnah and other works, served as rabbi of the town. More recently, Rabbi Yaakov Yosef of Polonoi, leading disciple of the Baal Shem Tov and author of Toldos Yaakov Yosef, the first Chassidic work ever printed, had been Rav in Nemirov. In the spring of 1648, Bogdan Khmelnytsky incited the Ukrainian Cossacks to armed resistance against Poland. His defeat of the Polish army signaled a general uprising throughout the region. Bands of peasants went from town to town and village to village, slaughtering thousands of Jews. Thousands from the surrounding areas fled to Nemirov, but the Cossacks entered the town and, with the cooperation of the local Ukrainian inhabitants, massacred some 6,000 Jews. The slaughter in Nemirov became symbolic of Jewish suffering during the period of the Khmelnytsky massacres, and throughout Poland, a fast was observed on the 20th of Sivan in commemoration of the massacre. After the quelling of the Cossack rebellion, the Jews began to rebuild their lives. By the 1770s, some 700 Jews were registered as living in Nemirov. The great synagogue of Nemirov, erected in the early 18th century, was notable for its splendor. Reb Noson was born on Shabbos, 15th of Shvat, Tuf Kuf Mem, 5540, that's Tu B'Shvat, January 22nd, 1780. He was the Bechor of the family. His father, Reb Noson Sternhartz, was young. He had married at the age of 13, as was customary in those days, and was a wealthy and respected textile merchant. In partnership with two others, he owned 3 large stores in Nemirov, Berdichev, and Odessa. But although he was a very busy man, he set daily sessions for Talmud study and always made sure to review the Medrash of the weekly Torah reading. Reb Noson's mother's name was Chayalana, and he had 3 brothers and a sister. As a young boy, Reb Noson became sharply aware of the shortness of man's life and the preciousness of every moment. His maternal grandfather, Reb Yitzchak Danzig, used to sit at the front of the shul together with the other leading elders of the community. As a child, Reb Noson would sit with his grandfather, and all the elders enjoyed his company. Once, on coming to shul, he noticed that one elderly man was not there. He asked his grandfather where he was. Reb Yitzchak replied that the man had died. "What does that mean?" asked the young Reb Noson. Reb Yitzchak explained that a person's life comes to an end, and he is buried. "Does the whole of this life lead to nothing but death?" questioned Reb Noson. "And if not, what is the purpose of life?" For the whole of his life, Reb Noson's heart burned with this question, and he searched for the answer: what is the true purpose of life? Raised in a comfortable home, Reb Noson was able to concentrate on his studies. As a young boy in Cheder, he was a diligent student. The nature of Talmudic study is to clarify each point through intense dialectics, but Reb Noson learned in a very straightforward way, without posing questions. The other boys in his group would try to develop complex arguments that often digressed from the true meaning of the text. But Reb Noson would say, "What can I do if I don't have questions?" His teacher praised Reb Noson's straightforward approach, saying, "I prefer Reb Noson's simple translation to the convoluted questions asked by the other boys." In 1792, when Reb Noson was 12, his father arranged a shidduch, marriage match, for him with Esther Shendel, daughter of the renowned Rabbi David Tzvi Auerbach, who was chief rabbi of Sharograd, Kremenetz, and Mohilev. Once, when speaking about Reb Noson, Rabbi David Tzvi said, "Among the young men offered for my daughter, there were some who were more learned than Reb Noson. But I took Reb Noson because he had nice, broad shoulders." Reb Noson and Esther Shendel were married in Sharograd after Tisha B'Av in July of 1793. Rabbi David Tzvi Auerbach. Although Rabbi David Tzvi had been orphaned as a very young boy, his father's soul came to him regularly and taught him Torah. When people began to find out about this, he stopped coming. For some 40 years, Rabbi David Tzvi did not sleep on a bed. Rather, he would sleep while leaning on his table, holding a lit candle between his fingers. When the candle burned down to near his hand, he awakened and promptly returned to his Torah study. As an example of his piety, he was extremely careful about the mitzvah of netilas yadayim, washing one's hands before eating bread. During the week, he would eat only those types of bread that are exempt from netilas yadayim. Only on Shabbos would Rabbi David Tzvi eat regular bread after washing his hands with all the stringencies of the law. Rabbi David Tzvi was the leading halachic authority throughout the Podolia district, where he served as head of the Beis Din. He was recognized as a tzaddik and respected by all. As Rav of Mohilev, he was always given the honor of sandik at a bris milah. Once, when Rabbi David Tzvi was away from town, a bris was due to be held. As the Chassidic master Rebbe Baruch of Mezhebuzh was visiting Mohilev at the time, the father of the infant asked him to be the sandik. However, Rabbi David Tzvi returned before the bris, leaving the father in a quandary. I've already asked Rabbi Baruch, but the Rav is here. Shouldn't I honor the Rav? When he asked the Beis Din, they ruled that the honor belonged to the Rav as the resident rabbi, while Rabbi Baruch was simply visiting. When Rabbi Baruch saw Rabbi David Tzvi walking to the bris, he remarked, "He is so holy and righteous that Elijah the prophet, Eliyahu Navi, dances before him." At one point, Rabbi David Tzvi Auerbach had himself been drawn to Chassidus. He visited Rabbi Pinchas of Koretz and was very impressed by his devotions. However, he was pained by the fact that his followers spoke against Rabbi Michal of Zlachov. When he went to Rabbi Michal, he was equally impressed by his devotions, but disturbed by his followers' negative attitude towards Rabbi Pinchas of Koretz and his circle. Rabbi David Tzvi said, "This one rejects that one rejects this one. I say they are both right." From then on, he distanced himself from Chassidus completely and became a leading misnagid, an opponent. Every day he used to lecture his family against the evils of Chassidus. Sharograd itself was a bastion of opposition to Chassidus. It was while Rabbi Yaakov Yosef of Polnoy had been Rav in the town some years previously that he had first gone to visit the Baal Shem Tov and become attached to him. His new ways aroused such opposition in Sharograd that he was forced to relinquish his position and leave the town. Reb Noson stayed in Sharograd with his father-in-law for a little over 2 years, from the time of his marriage in 1793 until after Sukkot 1795. So great was Rabbi David Tzvi Auerbach in Reb Noson's eyes that he said that at one point he could not understand in what way Moshe Rabbeinu himself was any greater than his father-in-law. Reb Noson continued his studies with his usual diligence. He had a keen, sharp mind, and under the wing of his father-in-law, the world-renowned Gaon, Reb Noson's capabilities in learning were honed to refinement. With all his time devoted to his studies, Reb Noson rose to very high levels of learning, becoming fully versed in Talmud and codes, the Shulchan Aruch. Rabbi David Tzvi wanted Reb Noson to fill his place as Rav in one of the towns where he officiated, and accordingly taught him how to determine the law and adjudicate in legal cases. Reb Noson had grown up in an atmosphere of opposition to Chassidus in his father's home, and now, in Rabbi David Tzvi's house, exposed to his daily talks, Reb Noson was naturally inclined to accept and support his father-in-law's view. However, even at this early stage of his life, Reb Noson felt himself at a loss. He sought fulfillment from his studies and prayers, yet much as he excelled, he was racked by inner conflicts. He felt instinctively drawn to the service of God, but he was an obsessive thinker and found it impossible to come to the inner peace he knew he should attain there. Time weighed heavily on him. Every second was precious, too precious to lose. His childhood question about the purpose of life burned within him. Of what real purpose is my life?